The Angry Chicken is a production of AMove TV. Bookmark amove.tv for more gaming and esports shows. The Angry Chicken is directly supported by listeners like you via patreon.com/TAC.
Everyone, get in here! Ready for action! I've got the beast in my sleigh.
A podcast about Hearthstone, Heroes of Warcraft. This is The Angry Chicken.
Greetings and welcome back, everyone. This is indeed The Angry Chicken. I'm Garrett Weinzierl, she's Jocelyn Carney, and we are joined today, for the first time ever, somehow, by RidiculousHat, the host of the Coin Concede podcast and the Vicious Syndicate podcast, both Hearthstone related. You may be the only person I know that rivals me for how many damn podcasts I'm on. Welcome, dude.
Thanks. Yeah, I there's a lot to be said for just being really active, and finding time is hard, but thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm glad we were able to make this work.
Thank you for sporting the local hat of Florida, which is Mickey ears. And in your honor, I went and grabbed the only Mickey ears I have in the home, which are back from when I got married.
Oh, my goodness.
Tuxedo ears.
So my hat has a hat.
It's hatception.
It is hatception. Well, Brad, dude, I'm so glad you can make the show today. We've done panels together at BlizzCon in the past, but we've never done this show together in the past. So if folks are unfamiliar, you've been doing Coin Concede for a really long time, and if folks want to go listen to that, they can go to coinconcede.com. But you're also a more recent host over on the Vicious Syndicate podcast as well, which kind of needs no introduction. If you play Hearthstone, you probably know what Vicious Syndicate is.
Yeah. It's a lot of the Hearthstone community is really great at allowing people to make effort and bring others together. And so the podcasts kind of have this, well, you all know, I don't have to explain to you. They create these micro communities of like-minded people that get to engage. It's really a great substitute for, I grew up playing Magic the Gathering, and it was all about the in-person situation of you go to the comic book store and you hang out on Friday nights or whatever. And instead we get these little micro bubbles around whatever podcast we're on, and people that all like the show and all like the same game. So of course, appreciate what you all do for community building. And I have been emulating it and learning, and we've been trying to bring people together as we go. You know how it is.
Yeah. The community aspect is particularly wonderful right now. So thanks for being a part of our community, everybody who is. And yeah.
And if you're not, you can't hear us anyways.
Exactly. So
yeah.
Eat Murlocs, you jerks.
That's how you build a community.
Yes, by talking trash about folks who are not currently a part of that community. I mean, if you talk smack and you weren't listening to the podcast to hear it, was the smack really spoken of?
I thought you were going to say, was the smack really talked?
I caught myself because I do words good, Joss.
You do words good.
I do words good.
How would you even cook a Murloc?
Well, Murloc I stew, or was it soup? Either way, was a really early recipe you learned in vanilla World of Warcraft. So you collected their eyes, which was like a common white item that would drop off of Murlocs, and you could make food with it, and wow. Also, Cookie was a Murloc chef in the Dead Mines dungeon. He dropped a mallet.
Did he cook Murloc soup and eat it? Because
no, but he did drop a rolling pin, and that was the actual weapon, like, visual, so you could run around and beat people with a rolling pin. It was a one-handed mace. It was great. I had it on my rogue for like a hot second. But RidiculousHat, if somehow our listeners are unaware, which I find unlikely because you do multiple Hearthstone podcasts, but what should they know about you? How long have you been playing Hearthstone, dude?
So you should know about me that I think I'm going to start with a general thing. What I've learned is that being active on Twitter, just gets you into a game and into a community, and that's kind of the approach I've taken. I got into Hearthstone, I guess 5 or 6 years ago, a long time ago. Blackrock Mountain had just come out, and TGT had not come out yet. That was 2015, 5 years, crazy.
Oh my god, I can't believe that was 2015, and not the start of Hearthstone either. And that was 5 years. Like, all these things that you're saying are you're blowing my mind right now. Like,
it's
crazy, you don't realize how long, when you just do it week over week over week, you don't really realize how long it's been. But
hey, Joss.
Don't say it, Garrett.
Hey, Joss. We've been doing this show since 2013. The closed beta began in August of 2013.
Oh my god.
Oh no.
It's been so long. WTF, how old is this?
If Hearthstone was a child, it would be going to 2nd grade or so.
Oh my, stop.
I mean, I don't.
You need to put context to these things.
I have a terrible memory of my own childhood, and I don't have children, so my frame of reference for how old that is completely irrelevant. I'm like, that's like 3 years old, right? You send kids to 2nd grade when they're 3 years old, right? Yeah, cool. Makes sense. I'm not that old.
Nailed it, Garrett.
Well done. So back in the old days, back before standard was a thing, listeners, I'm using this to justify my presence on this podcast because I'm an old timer. So I had gotten a job. Magic the Gathering is my background with card games. I'm a card gamer, not a Blizzard gamer to begin with. At this point, I'm a Blizzard gamer because, Blizzard is what it is.
Right.
And, video games are awesome. But Magic was my passion. And then I got a job for a major motion picture exhibitor about 13 years ago. And that's all nights and weekends. And in-person events are all nights and weekends. So you can't do both. And having money was better than spending money. So it gets complicated, but that's the short version. So I went for the thing that gave me the money instead of the thing that took it. And then I was looking for a card game to play. So there was a while there where I just didn't have a lot that I could do. But then Hearthstone came out, and when it came out on mobile, that was a really, really big deal. I said, okay, well, why not just invest in this and see where it goes? And I played a bunch, and it was really, really fun. I remember one of the first big investments I made. I kept losing to Wallet Warrior, to Control Warrior way back in the day, and I said, screw it, I'm going to sell some Magic cards and buy that deck because I hated losing to it so badly. And played that for a bunch, and then switched over and got Legend for the first time, I think also late 2015, by innovating out a Fel Reaver on turn 2.
Wow.
Yeah, we're going back.
We're going back in the day.
Yeah. But so throughout all of this, I was tweeting a bunch, as I know to do, and talking to other people in the Hearthstone podcast scene and all that. I had listened to TAC at this point and all the other podcasts that were around back then. And 1600 Dust as well was one of my favorites. They said, hey, you talk about this game a lot. Do you want to come on our podcast and do that? I was like, okay. And then I kept talking on whichever podcast they let me be on. And then Coincassie's like, hey, Cora's so awesome. She's going to go work for Blizzard. You seem slightly less awesome. Would you like to take her place? And it didn't actually say that. I'm paraphrasing. And I was like,
That's
sure,
amazing.
I agree. I am less awesome than Cora. And then I went on the show, and then they're like, okay, you can stay. And here we are. I think that's the short
Years
version.
and years later.
Yeah.
Well, as someone also less awesome than Cora, I think you're pretty awesome.
Yeah, we can all relate to being less awesome than Cora.
It's a big mood.
It's
just a
she has
thing
big
that
shoes.
happens.
One thing we all have in common is being slightly less awesome than Cora.
And then she has to go and get a job making the game. And it's like, I'm really happy for you, but also, why are you so good at everything? It's
amazing.
Yeah. But so yeah, that's the short version. And I don't know. Hearthstone is great. People are great. I like combining the two things.
It is a good thing.
Well,
to
we're
combine.
glad you're here.
Like the community talk we were talking about at the top of the show. So, well, rad, dude. So we're gonna talk about some news. We got a little wordage from Ixar before he went on his social media sabbatical that he is still on at the time of recording this podcast. But before we do that, we kind of had a sinking feeling there wouldn't be big, massive news this week because there wasn't any last week, and it seems maybe slightly early to have an expansion announcement. So I think we can officially call it, everybody. We are officially the pre-expansion lull.
Officially?
Officially. We're officially there. We were feeling it last week. We're kind of like, oh, what's that in the air? My bones are aching because I'm old. That's the thing that happens. I feel something coming.
Can we like get off this theme of how old we are, please?
We're not done yet, Joss. We're only 10 minutes into this podcast. There's plenty of more minutes to remind us of our impending mortality. But
thanks for really setting the mood there, Garrett.
Yeah, man. Yeah. It's such a bright and hopeful time we live in right now. But yeah, we're in it. We're definitely in it. It's a quiet ass week for Hearthstone. Not much new to discuss. However, we have been talking a lot of Battlegrounds as of late. So it felt like probably the time that we actually start to think about where are our heads at in standard Hearthstone. And hopefully this is the last chance we get to do a bit of a retrospective for Ashes of Outland. So that's exactly what we are going to do today. And also part of the reason we wanted you to join us, Hat, because you're still keeping the standard dream alive while I have just been a horrible trader and just hitting that Battlegrounds button time and time again for like the last few weeks. So
yes. How dare you spend hours and hours in the Hearthstone client playing a popular free-to-play game mode? So selfish.
Ow.
Cannot believe it.
Dare I? Yeah. And so here we are. I mean, it simultaneously feels like it wasn't that long ago that Ashes of Outland released, and at the same time feels like it's been a year since Ashes of Outland has released. And for me, I think a part of that is, and this isn't entirely as critical as I think it may sound, is that the meta hasn't changed too much since it was initially, for lack of a better word, figured out. And yet, there's been more balance updates than any other single expansion in the history of Hearthstone.
They've been so tweaky, though. They haven't been that many, like, nukes from orbit. They've just been like, oh, yeah, sorry, guys. Let's just, adjust that a little bit there. How about move that a little bit that way?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I mean, even after the most recent nerf, the meta was really revolving around Macaw, Beast, and Divine Shield, Poison, Murloc. So,
wait, wrong mode. I know you're trying to trick me into disagreeing with you because that's the only place my brain has been lately. But I know Hearthstone things still.
Yes, it's all Hearthstone. But yeah, I agree, Joss, 100%. All these nudges, there were a bunch of little nudges. The only nerf. There were a couple nerfs that I think were really, really significant in changing the meta, but one of them wasn't even about standard. It was changing Bloodbloom and Wild. That was a huge nerf. And the Sacrificial Pact nerf going way back. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, it feels like
which isn't even new stuff. Like,
yeah.
Which is weird. Normally, we get the big expansion come out and then they're playing around with stuff, something got missed or whatever, needs tweaking and, is way overpowered and crazy. And then they go, okay, we're changing it. But no, it's like, oh, wait, hang on. That like vanilla card is actually not something we thought about. Whoopsies.
Yeah, we released this really powerful new class, so let's nerf a card we made 7 years ago.
Right?
Wait, what? Sitting there scratching. I mean, I'm still sitting here just scratching my Skull of Gul'dan going, how has that card not been messed with? But yeah, like this is what I'm talking about. Like, it feels like it just released, and yet when I think of the state of the game when Ashes of Outland landed, like, we had 2 days of a meta that looked so different from what it looked like 2 days later because of how completely and totally busted frickin' Demon Hunter was. And yet at the same time, the Galakron Warlock being like the one foil, the one glimmer of fell-soaked hope against Demon Hunter at the time. But like those 2 days, like that seems like forever ago. Like pre the sack pack change, funny enough, I'm glad you mentioned it, feels like a really big milestone in the progression of the meta since Outland's release.
Yeah, and a lot of the Demon Hunter play patterns are the same, but you're right, the cards are so different. Part of that as well, though, you think about what we were leaving. If we put on our look back glasses and we look back at where we were leaving Year of the Dragon, the Descent of Dragons was kind of a crazy expansion as well. we got the fastest balance patch ever until this expansion, 9 days in, where Galakrond Shaman got nerfed because week 1 Galakrond Shaman was unbelievable. And then they nerfed it and they found out it was still good. But to your point, Josh, that was the nuke from orbit. And that kind of caused a different problem where I'm going to call this the Zentimo problem, where when you make a really powerful deck that includes legendaries like Zentimo that have never seen play before, have no other deck they fit in, and then they change some other cards, and you are left with a 3-mana 1/3 for Shaman when Shaman is unplayable. And that's kind of not super free-to-play friendly. It completely nukes a class and an archetype, and then it makes the meta shift in a really dramatic way around that. In DoD, I remember it feeling kind of dizzying because it changed everything, and then we got 4 weeks of the drip feed of cards, and it was so much to keep up with. Yeah. So I think we were concerned at the end of DoD and Galakrond's Awakening. Galakrond Rogue still was going to draw 4 cards and make them cost 0. Dragon Hunter lost basically nothing. Galakrond Warrior basically lost nothing. Quest Druid basically lost nothing. Really, the cards that were rotating out were Ziliax and Snip Snap. And
good riddance.
You say that, but have you ever played against a Demon Hunter and wish you top deck Ziliax?
Only every time I play against a Demon Hunter.
And only because I was so just done with Ziliax. I just play against Demon Hunter and go, I wish I'd top decked not this class as an opponent.
We suffered through the evolve meta for long enough that I completely forgot how bored I was of Ziliax. Ziliax being an offender was nowhere near the front of my brain space because of the evolve meta that we lived through. That, in my opinion, still ruined the freaking finals at BlizzCon because it lasted that long, and just made me cranky to the point where I'll just be cranky about it anytime I ever think about it. So yeah.
So yeah.
I'm trying to think, it's interesting. I'm glad you bring up Ziliax because off the top of my head, and already I found a direction I want to take this. There aren't as many. Nothing comes to mind as a ubiquitous neutral the way Ziliax or Snip Snap were, like right now. Like, I don't have an instant thing that pops in my head. Is there one that pops into your head, Hat or Jocelyn?
Zephyrus?
Not really.
Okay, Zephyrus.
Maybe. Yeah, Zephyrus maybe. Only because he's not in every deck, but he's in more decks than he should be because there's a lot of decks that don't even build around his condition and just like save him for mid to late game whenever your deck then satisfies the condition, which is one of my big problems. I think we talked about it before, but it's one of my big problems with the design of these Highlander cards. And I don't really know how they fix it because if you say like your deck starts this way, then it takes some of the like tech and counterplay out of the actual match. But then, you get these cards that they've built like Zephyrus. It's like so powerful that you don't even need to build around it, that you can just build a deck that draws a lot and it can have duplicates and still make use of the cards. So
still a little bit of a build around if if you're building around drawing so that you can actually put this card in your deck.
But everybody wants to draw cards, though.
Yeah, but not everyone can.
It's not a bad condition.
So I would say that everyone not being able to draw cards might be the root of the issue because the classes that can draw a ton of cards, Control Demon Hunter, and also, say, Quest Warlock, they can just play a 2-mana 3/2, and that happens to also sometimes be a Doomhammer or a Twisting Nether, or a Pyroblast, or Inner Demon, or something.
You still need to pay the mana for those cards you're rattling off.
Key too.
You're not getting those cards for 2 mana. You still have to pay the mana cost for those cards.
Well, okay,
but it
so
situationally gives you exactly what you need. It's not a totally random outcome.
No one's refuting that. I am just being a living, breathing YouTube comment in real time. But
that's what we should all aim for in life.
Thanks, Joss. Wow. All right, I'm just gonna. I'm so wounded. I'm not. Yeah, I'm just gonna walk away now. I would also like defend that a decent amount by saying like Highlander cards. I don't like. Yes, great examples. However, Highlander cards, I don't think they're on the same level. They're not on the same level as a Ziliax or a Snip Snap that were so ubiquitous. These were like all-star cards on the level of like Azure Drake in terms of how many damn decks that they made it into. And so
the Azure Drake problem was something they clearly wanted to address with these cards that just went in every deck. You had Ziliax and Snip Snap as examples. Lothab, if you're going way back, Sylvanas, Ragnaros, the Lich King, played against him a little bit in Wild.
Hey, Lothab, that's the card that probably should have gone in that event instead of Evolve.
Well, you don't have to choose.
Why not all?
A wild event.
Do you really want a rogue play a Galakron into a 0-mana Lothab? I guess that was Savior, so it was before that. But just, I don't know, Shadow Stepping Lothab still feels not great, but I agree that Evolve shouldn't have been. Neither here nor there.
Fair. I would like to play my own Lothab against a rogue, though. I think I'd be okay with that.
Yes.
But where my brain started to go is that, in a way, I think Galakron almost solved that ubiquitous problem, being ubiquitous in its own way, but unique for each class, so it doesn't feel as stale.
Well, but there's only a few classes that can use Galakron. So if you're going to say that Highlander doesn't count, then, like even the classes that got Galakron can still use Zephrys, so can still use Highlander cards. But if your class didn't get a Galakron, you cannot build a Galakron deck.
Okay. All right. Hold up. I'd like to try and kill you with kindness here, because like, as much as I would, push back a little bit at Highlander cards because of the restriction, like, really interesting points, and it's one of the closest things we have right now to a Snip Snap, to a Ziliax, are Zephrys, or even Dragon Queen Alex Strauss, as Kajitar mentions in the chat room, which is like right up there with Zephrys. But again, that Highlander or draw heavy caveat. But there's still something about Galakron that, even though the Galakrons themselves are unique for each class, there's those neutral Galakron cards that make playing against certain Galakron decks feel quite similar. So it's like
all the invoke cards. Yeah.
And then almost like a Cthulhu way, which I rather enjoyed Cthulhu, so I guess I'm not too bummed about it. But so I guess, have we landed on no? There's nothing quite as ubiquitous as
there's no current Ziliax, I think, is fair.
Wonderful. At least we can all agree on that. Let's go ahead and rip off this edgelord band-aid, Demon Hunter. Let's have the Demon Hunter talk while we're looking back at Ashes of Outland's kind of meta trajectory, which for a Demon Hunter is just slowly going down if it was a line graph, and then just plateauing.
Yeah, but like everybody else is still doing this while Demon Hunter's coming down. Like they're still doing this across the bottom.
Well, there's like Murloc Paladin that's just like going up the whole time. Highlander Hunter that's kind of going up the whole time. Warrior
would have a whole bunch of lines, and you guys definitely didn't see any of them. Cameras are hard. How does this work?
Yeah, Hat. Feel free to come in at any point.
The good news here is that this is an audio format podcast, so none of the listeners will see your lines anyways.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
That's cool.
I feel like Warrior would have been a line that would have been consistently climbing had anyone actually agreed on what a proper Warrior list was. But it was kind of in flux there for a bit. But Demon Hunter just started heads above everyone else and just got dinged and dinged and dinged, and yet still stayed above everyone else.
Yeah, there's a lot of question in the community about what the purpose was of releasing Demon Hunter in the state that it was in, and also how it stayed good despite being nerfed actually 4 times. And I think it is in the team's best interest for the new class to be good, because if it's bad, then you get so many jokes about it forever. They never go away. And it ends up being treated like, Hearthstone Classic Vanilla Shaman, where the best play was coin hero power into Flametongue Totem. And if that's your best play, then that's not really where you want to be. So Demon Hunter started a different spot. Now, they recognized very early on, 48 hours into the expansion release, hey, we pushed this too hard. Maybe 5-mana Skull and 5-mana Entei, and we're a little rough. Maybe 0-mana IB, maybe 3-mana 2/3 Eldrachi Warblades. Maybe these cards made it so Demon Hunter could literally do everything all the time. And so they nerfed some stuff, and then a week later they nerfed some more stuff. But the class is really the only consistent aggro deck you can play in Standard, and it also has a ton of really powerful board control tools. Though if we're going back a ways, a reminder of how insane this class was the first 2 days Warglaze of Azeroth was not good enough to fit in the deck. You did not play Warglaze of Azeroth. The card was not good enough on day one.
Yeah, gross.
Which is unbelievable.
Yeah.
So it had a ton of really powerful board control tools. It had a lot of life gain. It had a lot of really powerful aggression. It was just kind of good at everything. And other aggro decks couldn't compete with it. And also the format didn't have a ton of good aggressive tools. And there were a lot of good control tools. Now, we end up learning over a little bit of time. First, in that early meta, when you had Sack Pact, Galakron Warlock was the truth. You could kill their big stuff, and you could gain 5 life in the process. And then people started to figure out, I agree with you, Garrett, that nobody really knew where a good warrior list ended, but we figured out where it started. 2 Risky Skipper, 2 Corsair Cache, at least Ankar, probably some other weapons, and then Armor Smiths. And that was enough.
Pirates, essentially. Pirates and a little bit of armor generation, and go from there.
And you can do whatever you want with that core. And Corsair Cache is a card, I should point out, is played in every warrior deck in Standard and Wild. Card is unbelievable.
And Wild.
And Wild. You just get Ankar there, and then you remember the 3-mana 3/4 pirate that upgrades your weapon when you have another pirate. So your Ankar gets a pirate, and then it upgrades your Ankar, which goes to get a pirate, which upgrades your Ankar, and you get the idea, except at some point your opponent dies.
And this is why I hold on to Acidic Swamp Ooze like a damn... like my favorite teddy bear whenever I'm playing my Highlander Hunter, anytime I'm playing against a warrior. But yes, they figured out their core set of cards for sure. And also that's kind of cool in its own way. Usually we only talk about Highlander decks in that way, where it's like, well, here's the engine, now build the framework around it. You know, choose your wheels. And here I am with the car analogies, surprising no one. But it's cool that it's a non-Highlander archetype that we're talking about that has that kind of build around cornerstone. But so, you know, bringing it back to Demon Hunter, and I guess moving this conversation to looking forward, like expansion announcement has to be right around the corner. We don't know. It's usually July. And I want to say the last 2 years, we've gotten August releases for expansions. I don't have it up in front of me.
The last 5.
I was going to say, it's usually a summer expansion, and it's usually, I think we had a few that were like late August, like pushing into September-ish, but yeah, generally.
Yeah, so I looked this up. I looked this up. I don't just have dates memorized, but
I have it up now.
Outside of the Grand Tournament, which came out in August 24th, every other expansion has been released by the second Tuesday in August. Most are the first Tuesday, but some are the second Tuesday. So the chances of this coming out on, let's say, August 11th are very, very high. Now, we do need to make accommodations for the fact that all of Blizzard is working from home. They haven't said anything yet, but Blizzard not saying anything doesn't indicate any kind of news, as we've learned over the years. So it could be a little later. Probably not earlier, but I would expect next August, probably the 11th, the second Tuesday. That would be my initial guess, which means, well, Ashes, though, it had a different reveal season, right? That was more of a 3-week cram of information.
It was an absolute crunch. Yeah, it was. Yeah. That was when we decided we were not going to talk about every card revealed from now on. Like for there's so many YouTube channels.
I actually really liked that. I liked being able to do kind of like a deep dive into what we thought was interesting, because it was just absolutely impossible with the release schedule that they did to cram all of those cards into like the 2 episodes that we had a chance to actually talk about stuff. So yeah, I kind of like the reduced. I feel like since kind of the beginning of Hearthstone, I was railing against the drip feed of cards that they kept in, and like the conversation I remember between Garrett and I would just go around and around and around. Like,
listen, if I was just playing this game,
here comes the Garrett argument.
If I was just playing this game, I wouldn't want the drip feed. Just show me all the cards all at once and go.
But as a content creator,
the drip feed was perfect. Like, I hated it as a player, and I loved it as a content creator. And I'm being honest. I'm being honest with you. Like, I couldn't be more. There's my bias, everybody, on display. Here's the exception.
Yeah, I think they're in a middle ground now.
The exception is Boomsday, which did come out in July in 2018. But I do not think that's going to happen. Like, we are already.
No, I think if anything this year, we're pushing things back as opposed to making them come. I don't think anything's going to come any quicker than we expect it to. I think I prepare for delays.
I have been wondering if working from home for certain teams means they're accidentally getting more work done, because if they're anything like me, they're bad at disciplining themselves and turning off their work brain because they're working from home.
Yeah, and you can just run downstairs and be like, "Oh, I just have to do this one thing real quick. I just thought of, you know."
Yeah.
You can't just run into the office if you live half an hour away.
Personal time.
Yeah, exactly.
Like your personal time just evaporates. But the Hearthstone team is so dedicated. Like there have been so many times I tweet at Chad at 3 a.m. and he gets back to me in 5 minutes. I don't know how they do this. I don't know how they're so committed. We love it. But
well, it's because you and I are East Coast, and it's only midnight for Chad, so he's probably losing to Divine Shield, Poisonous Murlocs, and Battlegrounds at that time, and you're falling asleep with your final Hearthstone thoughts of the night. But yeah, the other thought though is that a lot of my friends I've talked to that work in games inform me that it has become meeting hell since the quarantine has started. Like infinitely more meetings than before, which I've got news for you, everybody. Meetings do not make you productive when you are trying to produce something. It's time you could be spent making things.
Like it's your their logic.
It's almost like I've had more meetings recently.
So how you doing, Garrett?
Doing fine,
you
man.
okay?
All right.
I'm doing
You have
great.
a platform if you want to share anything. We're here.
I've got a break coming up. I will not be here for the episode on the 22nd, and I am really looking forward to that break. I need a break. Need a break, everybody.
Yeah. When you get back, we'll have a meeting to talk about how it went.
Sounds good. But can we call it TAC so I don't think of it as a meeting?
But we can call whatever you want. Whatever you want.
Wonderful. That's what it is. You want a meeting with me? You need to make a podcast out of it, and then I don't think of it as a meeting. So, but seriously, bringing us back on track here.
Bringing it back to expansion timing.
Where do we want to see the meta go? I guess probably the easiest way to do this, I'm thinking, and maybe it's just because I have a thought, and it's pretty consistent with where my thoughts have been the last few times we talked about constructing. Hat, I'll ask you, and then I'll go to you, Joce. If you had to describe the meta we're currently in, like how do you perceive the current meta?
Let me put on my meta hat.
Okay. Oh, that is a good hat.
Yes, that is officially my favorite hat.
It's like if Jocelyn was dressing us up as Justin Timberlake from the early 2000s.
Yeah, I mean, we're bringing Sparkle back. We're bringing Sparkles back.
Bringing Sparkle back.
So how would I describe the meta right now? So this is actually, the word I'm going to use is stale and not unhealthy. I think unhealthy is the wrong word, but there are a bunch of things going on. First of all, COVID-19, kind of a thing. So people have less tolerance for stress, more time to play, or less time to play, depending on how many more meetings they have. They may actually have less time to play, and the meta is very skill intensive, and you have to know a lot about matchups to be successful. So if you're playing less, it's actually just as punishing if you're playing more, because you see people talk about how broken Demon Hunter is or how broken Warrior is, then you queue up with these decks after having not played in a week, and you say, I can't buy a win with this, why can't I win, blah, blah. You know, we all know where that thought process goes. Right. But also, all 3 expansions, Year of the Dragon, had something in the middle, right? Rise of Shadows had Rise of the Mechs. Saviors of Uldum had, well, that was like 4 different metas, because at first it had 5-mana Luna's Pocket Galaxy, which was really something. Then it was fixed, and then it had Tombs of Terror, which went on for approximately way too long. And then we got Battlegrounds, which was also a different meta. And then in the middle of DOD, we went nerf, 4 weeks of adventure cards, another nerf. So much churn, so much movement. The last time we had an expansion where we didn't get new cards in some way halfway through was Rasticon's Rumble. And there was also a feeling during Rasticon's Rumble, I can't speak for everybody, I can speak for myself, the game felt a little stale. And
I think it's because partly Rasticon's Rumble too, we've talked about before, just the cards themselves from that expansion didn't have the impact that a lot of like 3rd expansions have traditionally had. So when you combine that with, you're right, like without some sort of something in the middle to mix things up, it's like it felt like you were living with the stale meta from the 2nd expansion, and the 3rd one didn't shake it up. So you had this like almost a year of, whatever the summer meta was like, and it didn't really get shaken up a whole lot with that expansion release or with something in the middle, because they didn't have anything in the middle. So it was this whole big long stretch of time where we felt like everything was really samey. And I think like we got used to the thing in the middle, whether it was the events or the, you know, get the new influx of cards or whatever. We had like 2019 of that, right? And then 2020 hits. We're all in this, like you mentioned, the mental space that we're all in right now it should not be discounted at all. And this is also the time where what they've been focusing on has mostly been tweaking and balancing Demon Hunter into a class that feels like it belongs with the others. And they're not necessarily looking at the real like meta as a whole and trying to shake things up and do cool new things, because their focus has been on bringing this class in line.
Yeah. And I think it would also be, to provide a balanced perspective, I think it would be unreasonable to expect the team to make a new class and also make free single player content and also be working on the new game mode and have something in the middle of the set. It would be crazy, and also while working from home. So I don't mean to say the team should have put something out in the middle and they didn't, because that's definitely not what I'm conveying, and that's not what you're saying.
No, I can agree with that 100% too. It's not that I'm saying they did a bad job. It's just all of these are contributing factors to the meta feeling like it feels right now.
Yeah. And a lot of full-time Hearthstone content creators are saying the same thing. Now, luckily, we have a lot of awesome game modes. Wild is actually in a pretty good space. Battlegrounds is a completely different thing you can do in the client. There will be a new game mode during Phase 2, during the next expansion, as they revealed in the Hearthstone videos at the beginning of the year. There's a lot of different stuff to do in the client, as opposed to when Rostacon's Rumble came out, where if you didn't like whatever was good and wild at the time, and you didn't like standard, you just played a different game. So
there's options now, including Arena. Yeah. Arena is still a thing.
Yeah, Arena, right. Sorry, Arena players. I'm sorry.
They do still exist, I'm sure.
Yes. And also Arena right now, there's just the Highlander cards are so incredibly powerful that if you draft a DQA or a Zeph, if you're sick of that card in standard and then you lose to it in Arena where all of your cards are way worse, that's also, I'm sure that's not the best feeling in the world, but Arena's being worked on too. There are more things to do, but I also will totally not blame anyone for saying I'm bored of standard. I want something else to do right now. And we're a month away, but I hope that we hear something soon, because I know this month is going to go a little slowly, especially as we wait for whatever new thing comes out.
Mm-hmm. For me too, I think that the ladder changes made a big difference as well, because, you know, whether real or imagined, I felt like my climb every month was just insurmountable. There were just so many stars, and it didn't really matter how fast they went by, because I was just like, oh my God, okay. I kept looking at it as like, how many stars I have left to go. And that always just seemed like such a big number that I felt like everything was so far away. And then I was playing in this meta that, you know, while you said not unhealthy, was definitely unchanging for a lot of the couple of months has been. And I just fell off of that, because on the other hand, we had this super fun mode that we were playing that I really enjoyed that was changing very often and making, you know, big new changes to who you can play as, big new changes to what's in the mode that you can play with, like just big sweeping changes over and over and over that kept it very fresh, which I think is very important for that mode specifically, and maybe would not be fitting of a cadence for standard Hearthstone, but like they were basically the two extremes, right? So one kept me engaged and interested while the other was getting a little bit tired. And when I went into the mode, I was like, with Battlegrounds not necessarily having a top end, like I know what the top end MMRs of the crazy high streamers are, like, you know, but I don't ever feel like, you know, there's a top. So it's just whatever I get was good, as opposed to this like ladder where there's a very defined line and a number of stars of like, this is where I need to get to. And it was just so big. It was so big. So I just kind of moved away from it, and, you know, played a couple games here and there, but it was no longer my like main Hearthstone activity when I logged into the game. And a lot of that had to do with just the way that the meta kind of felt.
Well, and you're not alone I mean, I'm sure everyone has slightly different feelings on the meta, but in terms of like what noticing a distinct shift in where you're spending your game time in Hearthstone. It's called Battlegrounds. Like that's what we're beating around the bush here. Like if you weren't an arena player and you weren't a wild player, which you really weren't. I mean, we both dabble in the wild from time to time, but you and I are rather similar in that regard. You didn't have other options besides standard. You know, the dungeon runs last year really freaking good, and I know you and I both got sucked into those quite a bit. But we basically had standard. It's standard, and that was
yeah. So
where it
I
began,
feel like
that's where it
previously
ended.
I'd power through, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I don't love it right now, but there's nothing else to play, and so if I want to play Hearthstone, this is what I do.
Yeah.
And I had another option this time.
Yeah, and it's not just you, it's not just me. I mean, look at streamers that we know and love that have been streaming constructed Hearthstone for a very long time, and how many of them have switched full time to Battlegrounds.
Yeah.
Like, and I love that you mentioned the quarantine hat. Like, I think a lot of us, our threshold for those stresses and those anxieties, without something else to point to, something else to potentially blame to give us the out of feeling less terrible when we lose, in this case, RNG of the draft in a game, in a mode like Battlegrounds is what I'm referencing to. I'd like that those thresholds have been reduced for a lot of us.
Yeah, Hearthstone is the best Rorschach test ever made. It will take whatever feelings you have and it will show them back to you. And if you want to play Hearthstone, it can feel great. But if you need to play Hearthstone, or if you need to hit a rank to get some kind of validation of I had a terrible day, I need this win, or one of the things that I talk to people a lot about when I do coaching for CoinConcede, they say, okay, I'm going to set aside time on Saturday. It's Tuesday. I'm going to set aside time on Saturday when my work week is done to hit this rank. No, you will not. You will set aside time to play. You don't get to decide when you win. Trust me, Hearthstone is big on not letting you decide when you win sometimes. And if you're in the mindset to learn and to grow, that's fine. But with the new ladder system, it almost did what the last ladder system did as well. It replaced ranks with placements. And really, your actual rank is your multiplier, because your multiplier dictates who you play against and how fast you move. It will place you at a certain rank. It is very easy to get back there until your multiplier runs out. Very hard to progress. And when you're at that ranked floor, you are playing very high quality games against people of equal skill. It can feel like a grind. And when you look, like you said, you look at the horizon, Joce, there are just stars, endless stars.
Infinity stars.
Yeah, stars for days. And then you're like, you know what? I only need 6 stars to get this mama bear. And then you just go for those instead.
There's stars everywhere, even in the other mode that the majority of players are playing.
Yeah.
It's yeah. So where would we like to see the meta go? I am not inherently turned off because the meta is stale. The meta gets stale every meta. This happens every time. Eventually it's going to be figured out. This one, I think, has stayed, in quotations for the audio listeners, samey for a longer period of time. Which, if we rewind all the way back to the beginning of this discussion, that's what I was trying to get at when I was talking about we have had more balance changes than we ever had for a single expansion, and yet, for the most part, we've been fighting against the same archetypes, with things that we generally look at as crowning achievements of the team, balance-wise. We've had really good class diversity. We've had competitive archetypes for damn near every class that can go and succeed on ladder. And yet, they've kind of stayed the same. You know, warrior variations, Highlander variations notwithstanding. We've been playing against the same things for a while. And so, if nothing else, that's I hope, I'm kind of serving that up. This is my most, I think, agreeable statement. It was just like, I think that's why a decent amount of people are a little turned off of the meta right now, is that that's why it feels stale, because it's kind of been in a certain rut, in a certain status quo for so long, even though min-maxing, win rates of certain archetypes have gone up and down a little bit.
It's the feel. It's how it feels, right? And so that's really what we're talking about, is how it feels. And if we're looking at, like, we don't open Excel to play Hearthstone. We play by how we feel, and you can maximize win rates all you want. But there also gets to a point where saying, if I want to win the most in the shortest amount of time, I play Spell Druid and I mulligan hard for Breath of Dreams and Overgrowth, and I hope I play them. And then I hope that's good enough. And that's also not really all that compelling as a play pattern. That's not the sort of thing you're going to say, well, this is just the mathematically best thing to do, and just sit there and like mull for ramp, slam it down, and then hope that your exotic bounce seller spits out a bunch of Zixors. So I'm going to,
wait, do we just do the air grievances now? So you're choosing Druid?
Okay. Garrett, what makes you an angry chicken today?
Really the same.
It still priest?
Druid has creeped up. Druid really has creeped up. But I think the thing is that there's too many things that I find like there's a lot of high rolly decks, and I think that's if I were to try and put it under umbrella, there's a lot of high roll decks right now. Quite a few of them in different class colors, like Mage. From the get-go, I was like, well, Puzzle Box is still a thing. This is going to make me mad, and it did. It also made me mad in esports, which I wasn't quite sure was going to happen, but it's ruined playing and watching Hearthstone for me. But Druid also feels very high rolly, and Priest to a certain degree. Priest is less high roll and more just for the love of God, will this game end?
Don't play mirrors and concede early. Joce, what makes you an angry chicken in this meta?
I think everyone listening to the sound of my voice knows the answer to this question. I wish they'd never make Demon Hunter just delete it.
So, okay, let's compare those two things.
I love that you're here as our therapist hat. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hold on, let me find a therapist hat.
Oh my God,
it says ridiculous.
Wonderful.
Great.
Yes. All right. So this is my therapist hat. It is both my most and least ridiculous hat. So if you take those two things, Joce, you hate the most consistent class in the meta. Garrett, you hate all the high rolling. Why do these two very different things lead us to the same emotional conclusion? The reality is there's a bunch of stuff going on.
People?
Well, okay, that is a great answer. I think there's a lot going on there. I think that you and Garrett are in fact different people and different opinions. But when people have different opinions and reach the same emotional conclusion, there's usually something going on there. 4-set metas are kind of hard to feel complete. If we look back at the last 4-set meta, Rise of Shadows, that launched a little rocky. We had Dr. Boom and Waggle Pick and not a lot else. You go back the year before that, Witchwood, we had Q Block and Odd Paladin and Even Paladin and not a lot else. You go back before that, gosh, I don't even remember what that was.
Q Block.
Yeah. Before that was Angora. That was awesome. Angora was awesome, but you might find some people that maybe had some problem with Quest Rogue. We're going back a ways. It's a thing. So
I'm sorry, you could find people that have problem with Quest Rogues at any point when Quest was still in Rogue.
The whole time it was a thing. Yep.
Yeah. People are still hoping for the 5th nerf to that deck. Like maybe they'll just nerf it again. I don't know. But so everything, the 4-set meta is kind of hard to make even-handed in terms of power level because you have these, you don't have enough cards. So you have a deck like Highlander Hunter where if you draw Zephyrus and DQA, you're super duper happy. And if you draw like, I don't know, if you draw Stormhammer without a Dragon into Bone Wraith, you're like, my deck doesn't do anything. You have a deck like Demon Hunter that's really consistent because it preys on these decks. So if I'm a high roll deck, I need to hope I hit it. And if I'm Demon Hunter or Warrior or whatever, I need to hope they don't. And that's not really a great play pattern where one deck is trying to do the same thing all the time and the other is trying to go up and down and up and down and up and down. And there's no meeting in the middle there. So what we need to, if we go to looking forward, which is the topic that Garrett has been desperately trying to get the podcast to go on for quite a while, try and look forward. We need more consistency, both in terms of deck construction, which decks are viable. Card draw needs to be in every class. Every class. Put it in Paladin. Put it in Shaman. Even give it to Priest if you have to. At least they're not generating more Galakrond cards from their invokes. Just give it to Priest a little bit. They can draw a card here and there. I know. What are you all hoping to see? Joce, I know that you want Demon Hunter to get a little bit worse. What are you hoping is good?
Honestly, I think probably my biggest disappointment was Paladin with the whole Libram thing. Like, I really thought that was a cool idea, and I wanted to see that be more powerful than it kind of ended up playing out to be. And I'd like to see them get something to make that deck a little bit better. Like, I don't want to face only Libram Paladins, but that's a pretty, like, I think the problem that Garrett has with decks is that they're too, like, high roll, low roll, like you get it or you don't. But it doesn't mean he doesn't like powerful things. And I think I'm kind of the same way. I think we both like doing big, powerful plays. And so I think Paladin and Libram Paladin has the potential to be powerfully consistent. And I like that. I just want it to be it just needs to get there. And right now it can't get there because of everything else that's going on in the meta. The Demon Hunter just is super consistent and has a really aggressive early game and usually blows them out before they can actually do anything. And everybody else is like, you know, the Paladin can do as much as they want and make his big dudes and be like, her, Librams, books or power. And then Mage comes in and goes, I have a puzzle box, da-da-da-da, poof. And all of the Paladin's hard work goes away.
Fair. Yeah. Well, you stole mine. I mean, if I'm a laser focused on a class, that was my answer as well. And really, I think a lot of my kind of dissatisfaction with the meta kind of stems from that. I really like minion on minion combat. I like boards that stay on both sides, and there's a lot of interplay between the boards. And I just don't see a lot of that unless you're Demon Hunter and you're just concerned with your board and no one else has one. So, like,
it's just such a Rise of Shadows mood.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to.
Demon Hunter, I get a board, no one else does.
I'm playing that mostly for humor, and only a little bit like legitimate insular salt. But like, if you're a Magic fan, I loved Theros a lot. Now I've with Magic, I've only ever played limited. I don't get into constructed. I'd rather buy cars than decks. But there was.
You do actually have to choose in that game.
Yes, you do. You really do. And in limited in Theros, it was just fun. It was just big minions cracking into big minions, and it was board versus board, and not like board versus, oh, your tempo is better, so my board is just gone. Like, it's something we haven't had in a little while, I feel like, in Hearthstone. It's not something I always want. I like the oscillation in Hearthstone, and I think right now we're in a meta that isn't my particular jam. We always have grievances, and I'm sure someone, at least one listener, if not multiple, are going to be like, well, you were mad at the Evolve meta. Yeah, I was mad at like one card. I actually loved that Wild event, and well-documented saying, I wish they just would have done something about Evolve and kept the rest of the cards in. But right now it's like kind of this overarch. Like, I'm clearly, it's probably perfect timing. I'm definitely done with this meta. It should be changing up soon, but I hope we trend towards something that is more board versus board, and not kind of like hero versus board.
Yeah, or Warglaze versus board, or Altruist versus face.
Everything.
Why does that go face? Right?
Neither
here nor there.
We're not. I'm going to veto this. We've had that discussion.
This is a path we have been down many times.
Yeah.
Let's pretend that question was rhetorical. But yes, so Garrett, I think that's a great way to put it. Board mattering, risk investment mattering. There's a game designer named Patrick Sullivan who's also big in the Magic the Gathering community, and he talks about risk and investment leading to a lot of replayability. If you play something big and it sits on the board, and then it can win you the game the next turn. But sometimes your opponent has a removal spell and it's bad for you. And that's really interesting. That's dynamic from game to game. If all your minions have rush, or all of your cards do damage as soon as you play them, there's no interactivity, just what immediate value can I get out of my cards. And I would love for there to be more play this and wait a turn and hope something good happens gameplay. And the best deck that's doing that right now is No Hands Gamer's Cube Priest, Garrett. So maybe we can get you playing some Priest.
No.
Okay, maybe we can.
Just doesn't even want to hear what the archetype is like. Doesn't want to learn a new deck. Just Priest? Nope.
You know where else your board matter? Hearthstone Battlegrounds. Your board matters a lot.
Well,
noticing
if
a trend
that's
here.
what you like, the minion combat. That's all Battlegrounds is.
That's very different. They're doing the combat for you on your behalf.
Yeah, but they're still smacking into each other.
I mean, I think it's part of the reason it's satisfying, but it's a completely different game mode. But anyway, you asked, and that's my answer. I like it when boards fight boards in Hearthstone. And yeah, you really hit on something that I didn't touch on, Hat, which is it'd be nice to have a meta where some of the cards in our deck they're just stats and we wait, or stats plus a delayed effect. And that's good enough. And you're right. For the most part right now, that's not good enough. You get a little bit of that like in Dragon and Highlander Hunter, because some of the cards are pretty basic, but they empower other things that your deck are doing. Really, I think, oh my God. Oh, I had a breakthrough. Thank you, Professor Hat. I think this is why I've historically liked dragon decks.
There you go. It's dragon decks have historically, we look back at a card that it did generate immediate value, but also was really relevant at building board presence was Draconid Operative. We're going back a ways. Listeners, if you haven't been playing since Mean Streets of Gadget, it's a 5-mana 5/6. If you're holding a dragon, you discover a card from your opponent's deck. So it had value, but it was an enormous minion at the time. But the meta back then had a lot more aggressive strategies, which I honestly think the current meta is missing a little bit. It's really just Demon Hunter, where if you tried to play an on-curve stat-for-stat minion every turn, you would die to Leper Gnomes. You would die to Imp Gang bosses and Flame Imps and whatever. You would play 1 minion a turn. They would play 2 or more. They would hit you, and you could trade with 1, and then you would die. And right now, there's not really as many relevant aggressive strategies because there's so many good ways to kill small minions. But Dragon Priest has always been, outside of the Divine Favor, Inner Fire combo variants, which we won't speak of, have always been play a minion, hope I live, and then hit you. And you would top off with Primordial Drake, which was a big, thick 8-mana 4/8 taunt that was just, you wanted to attack for 4 a bunch of times. That was the game plan. It was really fun. We don't do that anymore.
Yeah, so, and that's a really good example of that existing in, I mean, this whole conversation is on the umbrella of what Hearthstone is and what so many other games are, which is asynchronous matchups, right? Like, it's not a mirror matchup. This isn't, we're not playing chess. We're not playing a fighting game where you both pick the same character because you're psychos and want to be weird like that. Like, this is asynchronous. It's what makes StarCraft so amazing, and it's part of what makes Hearthstone so amazing, and Magic the Gathering and plenty of other card games. But it's also challenging to balance around and have a satisfying back and forth between opponents at all times. And that's something that the old version of Dragon Priest that you just described, it carved a way out for it. There were like just enough stats if you were curving out correctly that, I mean, hell, it's playing like the breakpoint game that we play in Battlegrounds, right? Like there's like a point in that game mode where, like, you know, if you can just eke out 1 more health to have something on the board after the fact, you can eke out wins. And that's kind of what the Dragon Priests were doing back in the day, and other Dragon decks have done over the history of Hearthstone, which they have a kind of a fairly straightforward game plan. And so when Regis was on, I think the very first time, he was teasing me because I loved mid-range Paladin so much. We were talking about old decks that we really love, and he's like, God, that was so basic. But you need those. I think you need those for like the other. You need for things like combo decks and whatnot to really shine. There's not as much of it. As you kind of, I think, boiled Demon Hunter down too. It's like Demon Hunter's kind of eaten all of that pie of like, I'm just going to play things and it's going to work out. Or curve, like kind of just playing a curve game.
Well, and playing minions and then waiting a turn and then dragging them to the opponent's face is fun. It's fun to do. I want to be able to do that more often. I want to play Murlocs minions. Or Totems.
Yeah.
Let's you gotta go face.
you a Hunter player? I'm getting Hunter vibes from you.
Rogue.
Rogue. Okay. All right.
But Rogue is secretly an aggro class. Don't tell anybody. Rogue is all about, you think it's all about gadgets and turns, but it's really about cold blood get you. It's
so anyway, we've said our piece. Yeah, we've said our piece. Where would you like to see the meta go?
I would like to see the meta. So balance is a big deal because there are classes, there are decks you can play for each class, but they're pretty straightforward at this point. What you're playing. If I say Mage, you think Highlander or Spell. Probably have multiple Yogg boxes in it. If I say Hunter, it's Highlander or maybe Dragon. If I say Druid, it's ramp into something gross. There's just one way to do a lot of things right now. I'd like more options within the classes. We need card draw to be balanced a little bit more equally. It shouldn't be some classes get a lot and some classes get none. Some classes can be better at drawing cards, but no one can be really that bad at it. Libram Paladin, I enjoy playing Libram Paladin, except for the part where I reduce my Librams and then draw 1 card a turn and I say, I hope this is a cheaper Libram. And then if it's not, then I press the hero power button and I wait till I draw 1 card the next turn and I hope it's a cheaper Libram. And that is, you just do that until whatever happens in that game. And strategies that aren't Highlander, really hope that they push that. They've made that pretty clear, that they're hoping to prioritize other strategies. It's really just, I'm looking forward to a 5-set metagame where a few more cards, some decks just feel incomplete right now. And there are a lot of archetypes that I think were partially pushed, but we just don't have all the pieces yet. Would really look forward to classes being able to just do a little bit more, have a few more options. And in addition, we do know there is a balance change coming. There are a couple cards that I think need to be nudged if the meta is going to be healthy.
Well said. Well, before we move on and talk about the Ixar interview and another departure from Team 5, spoiler alert, it's actually old. This gentleman's actually been off the team for a little while now. Let's thank those of you supporting us over at patreon.com/TAC. If you like the Angry Chicken, you want to support us, that is the best way to do so. You get access to things like our Discord and ad-free feed. Plenty of perks over there for you. And to our most recent patrons, we want to thank Jared Rome Thompson, Anthony Link, and Rob Famognian. Is that what we'll choose to pronounce that one? As always, my last name is Weinzierl, and I apologize if I mispronounced your last name. And speaking of that ad-free feed, if you're not a patron, we will see you after the break. Hi, everyone. Just taking a quick minute to thank today's sponsor, HelloFresh. You should go check them out over at HelloFresh.com/80TAC. And if you use the code 80TAC, you're going to get $80 off your first box. If you've never used HelloFresh before, I'm such a big freaking fan. They're such a great meal kit service, and there's something for everyone. They've got low-calorie options, vegetarian options, and family-friendly recipes every single week. You can also save time. You don't need to stress as much about what you're making because HelloFresh offers contactless delivery to your doorstep. You can also easily change your delivery days or food preferences. You can even skip a week whenever you need to. I'm just a big fan of their food. Heck, next week, by the way, one of my favorite burgers they've ever done is coming back on the menu. I've sung their praises before because when I first started getting burgers from HelloFresh, I thought to myself, I've done burgers before. How can you make a burger cool? But every time I've gotten a burger from HelloFresh, there's always some twist on them. There's always something very memorable about it. And next week, the barbecue pork burgers are back on the menu. This is with a chipotle, as I like to call it, aioli, and potato wedges. It's delicious. HelloFresh is responsible for the first time I've ever even tried a pork burger. Absolutely delicious. It's summer. I'm always in a burger mood. I'm going to probably pair a beer with that, honestly, if I'm being honest with myself. It's going to be a good night when it's pork burger night next week. So go give them a shot. Go to HelloFresh.com/80TAC. Use the code 80TAC, and you're going to get a total of $80 off, including free shipping on your first box. Additional restrictions apply. Please visit HelloFresh.com for more details. Again, that's $80 off your first box when you go to HelloFresh.com/80TAC and use the code 80TAC. Let's get back to the show.
Good news, everyone!
So as we've been alluding to over the course of the episode, Ixar did have an interview. This was translated, and it can be found on the Hearthstone subreddit right now if you want to go give it a look-see before he took his social media sabbatical. And apparently we're going to be getting another balance patch before the next expansion, and I'm half expecting it to be announced in the middle of recording this podcast. Because Hat, you and I were talking a little bit before the show, and like there's another esports event. We have a Masters Tour coming up. I have to imagine the patch will hit before that, and obviously before the next expansion, as you know, well, Ixar says here.
Well, there's a 50% chance there's a nerf before the event. Either there is or there isn't.
Quite binary.
Yes, I hope it is because they had a Masters Tour about 2.5 weeks ago. And if there are 2 events with an identical format within 30 days, that seems not great for the viewer numbers. And I don't know if the YouTube gaming viewer numbers were already a lot to write home about, but
they are not.
Again, I don't.
But how much time do we have?
I don't think Hearthstone was the reason they wanted a Blizzard agreement.
Not at all.
No, I agree with you, as do the YouTube viewers. So the question here is, if they do this, and it is before the event, it has to be within the next 48 hours, right?
I would think so. I guess it kind of depends. They have to at least tell the competitors, I would think, with the most time they possibly can. When the actual patch goes in the game, I don't know, hopefully sooner rather than later, but like they have to tell people, right? Like they have to get decks submitted. So I don't know exactly what the lead time for Masters Tours is, but I think generally they have to have decks in by like the Tuesday before the tournament, right? So
now hold up.
It's got to be now.
Hold up.
or after.
Jocelyn, you're speaking like someone who has never worked a Blizzard esports event, which I know for a fact you have because I have too. And that's not how it works. Sometimes shit just gets dropped on you last minute.
Yeah, I know, but I'm always hoping.
I mean, they learned a bunch from a couple of events last year. WSOE was a big one where they nerfed. That was about a year and a half ago, where they nerfed the Druid cards the day before the event.
How long ago? Oh my god.
Yeah, that was the Rastakan's Rumble Druid nerfs, which was December 2018.
Yeah.
And then I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep bringing up years and age and dates and all that.
It's kind of crazy because it like all of these things are things that I remember from, time I was working at DreamHack or whatever, and all these other events, and I'm just like, man, I can't believe that was actually 2017, 2018. Like what?
Yeah, time is hard to parse normally, especially now. But the other major event that I think was the catalyst for esports and design talking a little bit more was the SEA, the Southeast Asian Games, last summer, where Gia was the big name that was playing that, but there were a bunch of players from Southeast Asia. It's kind of their localized.
That's the one that I was thinking of. That's why I was like, that was not a year and a half ago. Okay. Yeah. No. Okay. Last summer. It makes more sense.
So many esports events. But yeah, so this one, they actually had to add a tournament server because it was announced that the Tombs of Terror wildcards were rotating out 5 days before the next expansion. And the event was in those 5 days. So they had tested for months using that that meta. And then they were told the day before the event, we're changing.
They're gone.
Format.
Yeah.
So they made a drop down in the box. Gia took a picture of it that said tournament. He made a drop-down server that said tournament. And whenever you add something to the client, that costs money. And so they don't want to do that anymore and spend money on changing things. So if there's going to be a patch, I feel extremely confidently well before the decklist deadline, so they don't have to have separate instancing for tournament servers or something like that.
Or it'll happen after. That's the other option, right?
Which would give us 3 weeks. If they do it right after the Masters Tour, if they do it the Tuesday after, that would give us 3 full weeks of an adjusted meta before the expansion comes out. That's something,
Yeah, it's like but like it just feels better, has more impact to Hearthstone overall if it lands before the next esport event. So, would be nice. And so, chat room, we're keeping an eye on you. I mean, I'm hungry for dinner, and we're already quite deep into the show and runtime, more than I thought we were going to be. But I'm keeping an eye on you. If it pops up, let us know, and we'll just do a good old fashioned react in real time.
Breaking news.
That's the bumper right there. When the news drops mid recording that we had the patch notes, I'm gonna say, Jocelyn, hit it. You're gonna do exactly.
I'm on it. I got it. Don't worry.
And Hat will change into another.
He must have a news cap, right?
I don't have one within sitting distance.
Well, this is the news section, so the one he's wearing right now is his news hat.
That's true.
There we go.
By tact decree.
Much like the news, there are layers, much like the news.
By tact decree. Yeah, but there's plenty more things to glean from this interview. But that's the big thing, is that the patch will be coming, and kind of wondering where it is, frankly. So go give it a look. And then also, this has been making the rounds because it is a headline over on Hearthpwn right now, one that isn't like a card design competition or something, that Ben Thomson has left the Hearthstone team. On his ArtStation portfolio, he's made mention about his departure from said team. I already knew about this. For some reason, I thought we talked about it on the show, but now that I think about it, I don't think we did. Yeah. Yeah, because
I thought he was, and maybe I'm just remembering things incorrectly, but I thought he was one of the people, because I feel like, didn't Peter Whalen fall in this bubble too, of people who had like moved on from the Hearthstone team but were still with Blizzard, like just working on other mysterious projects? No, I believe Thomson is just gone from Blizzard. Yeah, and that's what I think that's the context that we talked about him in. Like, I thought we knew that he had moved on from the Hearthstone team, but I thought he was like in the group of people that were still at Blizzard. But now it seems that apparently, no, he's not. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're unfamiliar, Ben Thomson was the art director for the Hearthstone team.
He's such a fabulous person. This makes me sad.
Yeah, I really like Ben. And, obviously, folks, if you know a little bit more about my background, I went to school for art. That's what my degree is in. And so anytime I got to talk to Ben, I really got to nerd out. And you can find a really old episode now of the Angry Chicken called Art Stone, where we had Ben on. And I just talked his damn ear off about making art for Hearthstone. But like since then he's just grown, and especially after kind of the original, Broad and Woo went off to start Second Dinner, Thomson had really kind of stepped up and been a big voice for the team, and like being the voice for the team at last year's BlizzCon. He was on stage for the opening ceremony portions of like the announcement of Hearthstone Battlegrounds and everything else that was announced at last year's BlizzCon. So it was it looked like he had been teed up like, hey, you're the new voice of the game. And now he's gone as well. The voice of Hearthstone is really kind of becoming the defense against dark arts teacher of Blizzard personalities. We can't seem to keep one. So
I was not prepared for that analogy, and it cross streams for a second there, but yes, it's constantly changing.
Yeah.
And we finally saw after Ben Thomson, right in that transition period around when Ashes came out, that was really the first time we had met Ben Lee on camera, because he had been around for over a year, but we hadn't seen any video footage or anything like that.
Right. Yeah. You're absolutely right. But you'd been around for a year. So that was another one that was because Chris Siggety was in there for a hot second too. But didn't do very much forward-facing work. Although Chris Siggety hasn't done a lot. Like he's I always think of him with like a logo behind him for what is very much like a recorded, prepped interview for things like StarCraft 2 back when he was working on that. But yeah, Ben Lee does seem to be getting out there a little bit more. Although we haven't heard too much from him since the Ashes of Outland announcement, and he took him taking us through that roadmap that we keep referring back to. So we're still wondering why you put things like card effects on a roadmap. But
my theory currently is they're going to do something with card effects.
Whoa.
Crazy, I know.
Crazy speculation.
Yeah. Why would you say something so bold?
We here at the Angry Chicken are not necessarily associated with the opinions brought forward by the hat.
I apologize for compromising your journalistic integrity. Carry on.
Yeah. But I'm gonna miss Thomson. But yeah, freaking Hachikumo in chat room says it's the Tat curse. Every guest. So Hat, you should be getting hired by Blizzard any day now.
Well, that's true. Yeah, because we had Korra on, and then it was like poof, gone.
Yep.
So are you like you're the decider? If people don't work for Blizzard, they do after they're on your show, and if they do, then they don't.
Always the bridesmaid, never the bride here on the Angry Chicken.
So Garrett, during your vacation, when Joce gets another host, you can be the guest.
Ooh,
Whoa.
Done. I don't really want to move right now.
I don't know if it works that way.
I don't really want to move.
It would create a time paradox. We probably shouldn't mess with that. It's not a good idea.
I don't like that. No. We're not into that. So, and that's basically a Hearthstone news. Again, I was kind of hoping
there's not too much.
There'd be a patch before. Now there isn't. And so before we talk a little Battlegrounds, we have one more sponsor to thank today. Honey, they're back sponsoring this episode of The Angry Chicken, and you can get Honey for free at joinhoney.com/TAC. It's a free browser extension that just saves you money. It automatically finds promotion codes for wherever you're shopping, wherever you're buying stuff online, and applies them to your cart. Jocelyn, I have a problem.
It's shoes, isn't it, Garrett?
Actually, it's really bright outside, so right now the problem is sunglasses shopping.
Ah, okay. A little outside the Garrett box. I like it.
And Honey, like, it saved me $8. I bought a new pair of sunglasses. They're absolutely ridiculous. Can I describe them to you?
Oh, please,
right,
please do.
Tell me if I'm too old for these. They have semi-transparent, bright aquamarine teal frames.
Nice.
And then hot pink mirror finish lenses. And I saw them.
That's amazing. If anyone can pull them off, I think you can.
I appreciate your vote of confidence, Joss, and I also appreciate saving $8. So thanks, honey. It's real. I really do. I have it installed on all of my browsers, and it just freaking works. You've used it. It's just like up in the corner. It's like, hey, if you want to save some money, and you can be like, please.
I would very much like to save money now, honey.
So if you don't already have it, you could be straight up missing out on free money. It's free. It installs in just a few seconds. And by getting it, you'll be doing yourself a solid while also supporting the Angry Chicken. So go check them out. Get Honey for free at joinhoney.com/TAC. That's joinhoney.com/TAC.
Have a good battle, friend.
We got rumors. Y'all ready for rumors? Battlegrounds.
I was like, I've done enough of these stupid little sound bites. I'm not doing it this time. And Garrett, you just, thank you.
I hope you enjoy it.
Do you all normally have a soundboard? Is it broken?
We do both.
Yep, a little bit of column A, a little bit of column
Actually,
B.
folks don't know this because we're so consistent, but all of our bumpers are actually performed live in real time.
I assume you're just a really talented beatboxer going for like a down tempo look going into these other sections.
Pretty much. But so we've made mention of the 8-player lobby. It's come up multiple times over the past couple episodes of the Angry Chicken. It has been confirmed that it is something that is in development. This was confirmed all the way back in March by Ixar via an interview that he had with Hearthpone. And so we still haven't had any official news on when the heck it is coming. But now the Twitter account for the Hearthstone companion app Firestone has tweeted that references to a new friendly Battlegrounds game mode can now be found in the game's code. And you're thinking to yourself, that's not news. We know an 8-player mode's being worked on. They call it friendly. Cool. Way to really scrape the bottom of the barrel for some news. And I say, nay. Also found in this code are references to a 4-player, quote, member count that has many speculating that it will be able to head into the Battlegrounds ladder in a 4-stack instead of just 2. What do you think of this? Joss, you wanna grab RidiculousHat and I don't know, Slissa and like 4-stack into a game of Battlegrounds and just run the table because we're on voice chat and clearly cheating because it's just like, what are you going? I'm not going to draft that. Okay, because it's Battlegrounds and you wouldn't, be offered nothing but Murlocs when you try and deploy a strategy like that.
It's interesting because like 4 players can definitely impact a lobby a whole lot more than just 2 players, right? Especially with the restricted tribe world that we live in now. So this would definitely worry me that I would be going into, like, as a solo queue person, I would be going into a lobby and it's basically like a 4v1, and they can much easier. It's much easier for them to manipulate it. Now, it's kind of interesting because on the one hand, you can already see what your opponent is working on, right? You can already see like demons, murlocs, beasts, mechs, whatever. That's built into the client. But I think there's something to be said, especially in a meta where there's more than one viable build of each different minion type. I think it's very important to have, or like it's important to know, but also it's random with depending on who you're facing. Like there's so much more information available to you if you're on voice with everybody and you can say, I'm drafting big demons, I'm drafting juggler demons, I'm drafting, this, that, and the other thing, and letting people actually know what your play style is. Like that's just so much more information. And you can change things around, like we've seen in the Battlegrounds Brawl a few weeks ago. You can change around your positioning if you see you're facing off against a teammate, which then could, if you've got a teammate who's Reform, that can make a big difference. If you're trying to get as close to a tie as you possibly can against your teammate, then you would change your positioning around in order to try to guarantee that as much as you possibly could.
Yeah, varying degrees of success.
Yeah, exactly. But like you're basically trying to level the playing field and keep your teammates in the lobby as long as you possibly can. And that totally changes the way things in Battlegrounds work, right? And you also, because half of the members of the Battleground are going to be in like on your team, call it, like are people that you want to keep in there, that also means you're going to queue into your team like twice as often as you would if there was only one other person, right? There's just a higher probability that you will queue into someone who is on your team. So I feel like this almost guarantees a win for the majority of your, like, I would be surprised. You'd have to get a pretty terrible draft and some pretty crappy like matchups in order to get knocked out if you're playing in a 4-player lobby, like knocked out without a win. So then it seems like this could be very easily abused to boost up MMRs. Now, MMR doesn't really mean anything. There's no money tied to this mode. Like high MMRs is just a flex. So, you know, who really cares? But
it would be a lot easier and, well, possible in any way, shape, or form to do a community Battlegrounds event and maybe even seed it via leaderboards. You know, if the people that are playing are on the leaderboards, once 8-player lobbies hit, but like
true, yeah, because 8-player lobbies are kind of like how we expect the community to be able to create tournaments and for us to have our own events and not have to rely on Blizzard doing a brawl every 3 to 4 months. Like this is the way for us to actually create a competitive tournament battleground scene, which I think is really interesting and could be fun and cool. And I do really enjoy watching, like Battlegrounds is really enjoyable for me to watch on Twitch, whether it's just one person playing or whether it's these tournaments. So I think there's a market there for that kind of content and I'm excited to see it being created. But, you know, like when we're talking about like these 4-player lobbies, and you're right, like if I'm going to make a tournament and if I'm going to seed a tournament, then what am I going to use? I'm probably going to use MMR. But then again, like that's all community stuff. Does Blizzard really care? I don't know, because Blizzard doesn't support that kind of a competitive space currently in this mode.
I would wonder if they would do up to 4 people if MMR just wasn't a thing. Like if you played with a certain number of people in your party, MMR was just
won't change.
It didn't. Yeah. But also it would question, would that be for you or for everybody? Are you able to just join with the party and invalidate people's ability to move? Because that also wouldn't really work all that great.
Oh, people would be furious. There's no way.
Oh yeah, no.
That would be...
But okay, so if you took Slissa and us in a lobby, I think we can generally say Slissa is better than us, right?
Yes.
Her MMR is
by much
13K, right?
Yeah,
last I saw, yeah, she switches between accounts, but yeah, it's up there. Both of them are up there.
All of her accounts are like 3 times my MMR score, so
they're quite high.
If you had a single MMR outlier and you had 4 people, how would you even find a match through that? And who would it be fair for in the other party? The only way I can see this making sense is if you were queuing a 4-stack into a different 4-stack, right? It was 4 on 4.
But if the way Battlegrounds is talked about, especially when things like the Tavern Pass are invoked, it seems to me like Battlegrounds is a runaway freaking success in terms of player numbers. So I do think it would be possible to put the restriction of only being able to queue against other 4-stacks in there. Now, only queuing against other 4-stacks and finding an MMR average between the 4 people that queued up, that becomes a bigger ask. But
so maybe it's just maybe it's a no MMR mode. Maybe that's something that they're potentially looking at, which I think that even just calling this thing like friendly Battlegrounds, like maybe it's all part of a bigger update to Battlegrounds that involves, you know, the ability to create a full 8-man lobby, the ability to go into a mode where your MMR isn't at risk and you can practice things, and you can do that with 1 to 4 players. And then you have your typical MMR, like rated battleground area, which is what we traditionally think of as Battlegrounds mode as it exists right now.
Yeah.
Like maybe we're looking at a 3-pronged approach to it. What I kind of take from this, or like that I haven't seen necessarily a whole lot of people talking about is the fact that it's referenced as the friendly Battlegrounds like game mode. Is this the new game mode, or are we still expecting something else on top of it? Like we've talked about, you know, I guess technically they've hinted at it using our collection, so maybe we are getting something else. Yeah, like
there's no way.
I'm kind
there's
of
no
as
way
I'm talking about it, I'm talking kind of around it, but I'm like, are we getting this as the game mode in phase 2, and then the collection game modes coming like at the end of the year in phase 3? Like
no, because every time that there have been interviews where the game mode has been brought up and the using your collection thing has been the answer given to the game mode, and they're specifically talking about the icon on the roadmap under phase 2. Like,
okay,
maybe there's wiggle room there, but if there is, I'm gonna riot.
Okay, no, I'm just curious because I mean, like as we've talked about already on the show today, there has been, you know, like this year, guys, this year is just effed up. All right, so you know, maybe when we put out a roadmap, maybe they weren't thinking, you know, we were gonna have this crazy upending. Yeah, like maybe there was a new mode that was like spell locked, and they thought that things were gonna come out and what like. Things can change.
Oh, I thought I was going to.
I
was going to go. One of the spell locked icons is surprised 4 more months of COVID.
Oh my God.
Josh, I'm going to get bumper stickers made up. 2020, this year is effed up. And just put it in the car, which I don't drive anymore because who goes anywhere?
Right.
Yeah. Though, but
I bought a car in January and it has barely moved.
Especially with HelloFresh.com/80tac.
Oh God! Yeah,
I'm impressed. That was a smooth sponsor plug right there. And you know, I'll also be impressed if the Hearthstone team manages to put this mode in the game, whatever form it takes, to be able to get 8 players in the lobby. You could definitely run tournaments on this mode. So tournament mode is confirmed coming to Hearthstone this year.
Yeah,
you heard it here on tap.
Not for the mode that we thought.
I'm pretty skeptical about this for all of the reasons you just mentioned. You know, I think they could be. There's ways to do it. I'm skeptical of 4 stacks in general. I'm skeptical of them adding sub ways to play Battlegrounds under the Battlegrounds tab. Yes, we do have sub options in other ways to play, but historically, Hearthstone has been loath to overcomplicate their UI.
Yeah.
Which doesn't say it hasn't happened before. It definitely 100% has. But that my brain tends to shy away from things like that. And so if this is a thing, I tend to think that they're probably just programming it to matchmake you against another 4 stack. And maybe even warn you, a little pop up, just like, boop, warning, this way madness lies. Like you may be matched against people who are way better than you, but you brought it on yourself by 4 stacking. Which I would be okay with. It'd be kind of fun. Like it'd be kind of a fun thing to do from time to time. Also, it'd be kind of fun to convince all of my friends to get a European account, and we'll just 4 stack on that one, and maybe not care so much about our MMR over there.
Crazy matchmaking, yeah. So one more question here. We've got a feature in the 8-player lobbies that has been confirmed and talked about since March. We've got references to a 4-player member count, which may or may not be a change to the way that we play ladder within Battlegrounds. Do we think that the combination of friendly Battlegrounds / 8-player lobbies, whatever you want to call it, on top of this 4-player member count, could this be the last major thing they add to Battlegrounds before it stops being a beta?
Ooh.
Because this has been in beta for a while now.
I like that a lot.
That's a big question. Yeah.
I like that a lot. And also, like, in compliments of the mode, it feels done. Like, you know what? The first thing, the only thing that immediately pops in my brain as an issue is, like, the shadow of the rope. Technically a fuse, but we've called it a rope for so long. The shadow that
so much more than it should. Like it doesn't matter.
Shoots out to the right, like, and it mirrors that like. Oh, you know what? That and pirate comps do that weird animation hitch once they get the buffer on board.
Oh yeah, like they start to attack and then they go, oh.
Yeah, that and the Fuse Shadow extending out into infinitum are the only things that really stick out to me as like kind of janky. And by basically every other game studio's standards, that would be a shipped product. So, including other Blizzard games like Warcraft 3 Reforged. It feels ready. Like they've figured out their cadence. The second time that word will be brought up today, but this is in the Heroes of the Storm show, so I don't need to shed a tear. They figured out the cadence of updates for the mode. I think it's pretty damn good. I think it's in a healthy place. And when it usually right about the time it gets boring, that's when an update hits. We have expectations now for how Battlegrounds progresses. So to me, like it doesn't feel like a beta anymore. Like just by my own, you talked about field being really important in standard and in meta and where you want the game to go. It's important in Battlegrounds as well. It feels finished to me. So yeah, I think that might be it. That might be the point where we arbitrarily take off the beta sticker.
Yeah, don't worry, Blizz. We're calling it for you. Once you get this out there, just rip off that beta Band-Aid.
That's what they were waiting for. I talked to Celestalon the other night, and he was like, "Hey, are we allowed to say that it's not beta anymore?" And I was like, "I think I speak for Jocelyn and Hearthstone players as a whole when I say yes."
The only thing that I think they could add that I don't know if they will add, and I think this would be a positive thing, but it might not, is a ranked system. They could have a ranked system because I also don't know if the raw MMR number as an indicator of your performance in the game is necessarily all that helpful, but I also don't know how they translate it into a ranked system because we have that in standard, and I think that system has some ups and downs to it.
I liked seeing my MMR personally, and I think we talked about this a little bit. Yeah, when we first were talking about the rank changes, I like seeing the little changes to my MMR based on who's in my lobby and what's going on. And even though the overall number may not have any kind of higher meaning to it, like bronze, silver, gold, plat, whatever, I actually kind of like it better. I'm pretty attached to my number. I don't want them to replace it with any sort of ladder system. I like seeing it because then I can relate to it and I know, I can see the changes and I can gauge my lobbies. And like, I like that. What to me feels like an added layer of information, right? So I like it. I don't want to see it go away. I don't want it hidden like it is in standard. It makes me sad in standard.
Yeah, like even if they go to a bronze through diamond system, I hope they retain a number somehow. Like just keep the number and then just like I don't know,
put a star on top of it.
Put an easier to explain. Yeah, an easier to explain rank above it. Like range X number through X number falls into this parameter. Because I like the number itself doesn't mean as much to me, but I'd like, as you said, Joss, I like at the end of the game seeing the really granular numbers there's something about it that I like. Although really at the end of the day, I think I like more that it hasn't reset, and there's got to be a reset coming, right? But
when they take it out of beta, probably. But the MMR is a very personal number. I think the real advantage of some kind of ranked identifier, and it could just be show the MMR and then at certain tiers it levels up, is just a reward system. Because right now, playing Battlegrounds, you don't get rewards the same way you do in Standard. And 10 gold every 3 games is 20 minutes in Standard and 90 minutes in BGs. Well, it's only fast in BGs if you're losing a lot, and you don't. And then you don't get the 10 gold for every 3 wins.
Thank you for reminding me you got anything from Battlegrounds.
Right.
Yeah.
I forgot.
There's some opportunity there for wins to correspond to some level of gold, or there could be some reward every so often, or just more Battleground specific quests. Maybe there's an option maybe they change the reroll button that you can re-roll a construction quest into a BG quest or the other way around. Now, that adds more buttons. And like you said, Garrett, they don't like adding extra buttons. It's really all about simplicity. But if you're a Battlegrounds-only player, a Battlegrounds-specific player, and you get a bunch of quests to play Standard or Wild, they just sit there, and you just re-roll them and hope you play 2 BGs. So
it's almost as ridiculous as getting an arena ticket when I buy a tavern pass.
Yeah. Man.
So basically, the point that we've kind of come around to is maybe this isn't the last thing that they need to change and address before they come out of beta. Maybe there's still more work to be done on Battlegrounds, which is cool because, you know, more work, more patches, more coverage. Love it.
Yeah, I guess a lot of this I would file under things I could see them wanting versus things I want, because like I really like it as is. I think it's good enough. Yeah. Clearly, I put a lot of hours into it, but yeah, it could be polished more for sure. So yeah, you mentioning rewards, I think that might be the holdout. Actually, now that you bring it up, that's probably going to be the holdout for getting rid of the beta sticker for whatever much that is worth. I mean, at the end of the day, if we're enjoying playing it, we're going to continue doing that, and that's certainly what I'm going to be doing. So. Well, we're going a bit long, so we'll probably just take one question, but let's move into this week's email section.
Hello?
Hello, it's me.
Hello.
Just quickly, do you get my message?
Yep.
Oh.
Hello, brother.
You can send your emails to tacpodcast@gmail.com, or if you're a patron, drop us a message right in the patron Discord. Skip the inbox entirely. I'm going to throw to Hat as our guest today, and because it's highlighted in your color because we color coordinate our show notes. Who does the question come to
even though it's always Garrett's takes the first email, like he can't get over the color coding. He's like, no, it's purple. Can't read it. It's purple.
Can't read it. Can't read it.
This is the law of the show notes, and we uphold the law in this land of the angry chicken.
Sorry, Hat. Go
ahead. This is the way.
No.
This is the way.
Yes, this is the way. So this is an email from Nick S. Nick, thank you so much for writing into the show. Nick writes, hello there. I find the copy and paste format for deck building in Standard to be a bit formulaic, and I was wondering what tips you have for someone who wants to build competitively viable decks but doesn't want to be predictable. I like the idea of my opponent having to think more about what I'm doing and what my deck is going to build to. What are some general guidelines to follow, like how many cards each cost, etc.? This is a huge question. So Nick, thanks for writing in. The best advice I can give up front is start at the beginning of a format. Right when an expansion comes out is going to be the best time to do it. If you look at doing this right now, there are a lot of decks that have been tweaked and tuned and refined for months. It's going to be really difficult to break in when people have been practicing and refining these strategies right now. I do think that Wild has a little bit more accessibility here, a wider card pool, but also you're going to play against more powerful effects. So it really depends what you're looking for. As far as where you should start, the way to really look at your deck, you want to think about builder rounds. Now, we talked about this a little bit with Warrior. You're starting your deck with Corsair Cache, Ankar, Risky Skipper, probably Battle Rage, probably Armorsmith. If you're starting with Demon Hunter, you are starting with Skull of Gul'dan. You're starting with Warglaze Vaznoth with Altruis, and that is kind of defining where your strategy goes. And you can do this with almost any deck. This is actually a good strategy for working on your deck building ability. Find a deck that you have played against and take out the cards that are the build arounds. List specifically, this deck is built around these cards. If you can identify those cards, then you can start doing the same thing with your own deck. If you're going to build a Highlander deck, you're not going to play it without Zephyr DQA, right? Like you're going to play those cards. So when you're finding a strategy that you want to do, figure out something that's powerful enough to start with. Maybe in Standard, we can look at a card that we know is good, but maybe isn't seeing a lot of play right now. Let's say Mana Cyclone. All right, if you were going to start with a Mana Cyclone deck, if you were building around that, what would it look like? You would for sure have cards like Evocation to make a bunch of spells. You would have Ray of Frost. You would probably have Sorcerer's Apprentice. These are your key support cards. You take the card you want to build around, you find the tools that really hold it up, and you end up looking at say you have, I'm getting distracted by a tweet that just notified me.
It happens to the best of us.
Yes. So you look at it, when you have your Mana Cyclone, you have your Sorcerer's Apprentice, you have your Ray of Frost, you look at these low-cost spell cards, then you figure out ways to pay off your spells. Maybe you have your Mana Giant, maybe Conjurer's Calling, something like that. And you build out from there. You want to make sure that when you're looking at a mana curve, this is a complicated thing. It's going to depend on what strategy you want to build. A more aggressive deck is going to be a little lower to the ground. A more control-oriented deck is going to have a lot more removal spells. It might be slower in the beginning. It's really about what is the thing that I want my deck to do, and then what are the cards that support it. So start building piece by piece of find your build arounds, figure out the key support cards that make those build arounds work, fill out the deck list, and then try it. play, maybe against a friend, maybe on the ladder if you want, maybe in casual, and take out cards and put in cards in like chunks of 4 cards or so at a time and see what makes sense, what doesn't, what works, what doesn't, what aligns with my strategy, what's feeling a little clunky, which card do I die a lot with it in hand, which card do I play and then I win those games, and figure out where you go from there. This is a very, very short answer for a very, very big topic, and I don't want to make the show go any longer than, oh my goodness, an hour and 45 minutes. We'll stop there, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, and those are all great tips, because beyond that, we get into real basics, which is like your curve is very important and something you need to look at and something you need to understand before building a deck in essentially any card game. And you also got into one of my favorite things, which is like go look at existing decks. Like that's an important thing, but don't copy and paste it. But like Hat said, look at what makes them go. Why do they work? And beyond that, as we spent the first hour of the show talking about with the current meta, there does exist archetypes with room for your own flourishes and your own personalization. We are in another meta where Highlander decks exist, and those have historically been the types of decks that we recommend on the show for folks that want to have more personalization over what they do. And also, I think could be a gateway for you if your goal, Nick, is to climb and to be competitive in Hearthstone, because eventually you will land on standing on the shoulders of somebody. You go long enough with your own deck and and if you're doing it correctly, again, with the goal being winning consistently, you're probably going to stick your head up at one point and go, oh my God, I landed on an existing archetype. Like you might end up there. That's very possible. So it's good to take a look. If again, your goal is being truly competitive. Because even if you're copying and pasting that decking right now, if you end up getting into tournaments, you're gonna want a tech, and your deck building knowledge is going to allow you to do that and to do it effectively. So
yeah. It's really a question of goal setting. I'm not going to go too much longer, I promise. It's really a question of goal setting of, if you want to play Hearthstone in its terms, play a good deck that you know is good. If you want to play Hearthstone on your terms, you can do that, but be aware your win rate is going to get lower. If you want to play Hearthstone on your terms and win, you better be a really, really good deck builder or accept that you can't do both. And it's all a question of goal setting and recognition of, do I play the game the way Hearthstone wants to be played right now, or do I play it my way and understand that may not be compatible?
Sacrifices.
Well damn said. Well, awesome. Folks, keep them coming. tacpodcast@gmail.com. Again, if you're supporting us on Patreon, we've got a Discord that you can talk to us directly right in there. And don't be afraid to tag me. I feel like folks are like afraid to use the tag system in Discord. Let me know. Sometimes I go scrolling through, I'm like, that's an amazing concern or question, and I totally missed it. So anyways, that's going to bring us to the end of this episode. Speaking of our patrons, thank you so much for your support, everyone. We wouldn't be able to put as much time into the show as we do without your support. And if you like the show, you want to support us, head on over, patreon.com/TAC. Huge thanks to our producers, by the way, Declan H and Cheesy Bob. If you want to become an Angry Chicken producer, go check out the Patreon. Before we go, Ridiculous Hat as our guest today. Where are all of the fine places that people can find your Hearthstone content?
I'm going to go fast. You can find me at RidiculousHat on Twitter or twitch.tv/RidiculousHat. I stream Monday through Friday at noon, usually for a couple hours, sometimes a little bit longer. Wild Wednesdays are on Wednesdays. At CoinConceit or CoinConceit.com. We cast live on Thursdays, 8:30 p.m. Eastern on twitch.coinconceit.com. We talk in Discord all the time at discord.coinconceit.com. Vicious HS is where I talk about the Data Reaper report along with Zacho at vicioussyndicate.com. I'm on the podcast weekly, do the class research for Rogue, and it used to be Demon Hunter, but they hired somebody else. I'm also the commissioner over at TeamHearthLegends.com, which you can find at THL_HS, which is a community tournament format that is definitely not a league. It's a series. Yeah, that's it right now.
Legal disclaimer asterisk here.
Anyone who is still listening at the 1.5 times speed,
oh my God,
tweet at us at TAC Podcast and let us know how that sounded, please. And thank you. Jocelyn, what about you?
You find me on Twitter and Twitch. I'm at Joss Plays. That's it.
I'm Garrett Art on Twitter, amove.tv for this podcast and every single other one that I produce. I will particularly point out Into the Nexus this week because we will be once again joined by the lead balance designer of the Heroes of the Storm team tomorrow, AZ Jackson. We're going to be picking his brain about Heroes of the Storm, and there's been a lot going on over there. I know every time I mention this, someone's like, what, that game is still around? Yeah, you don't even know the half of it. So really looking forward to picking his brain about that. So go find Into the Nexus wherever podcasts can be found. Ridiculous Hat, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, everyone, follow him on Twitter at RidiculousHat and find all of the wonderful shows that he produces. And until next time, job's done.
Job's done.
Job's done.
That's a show.
Roll.
That was a meaty discussion.
Yeah.
Extensive. Yeah, I was going to ask about runtime ahead of time because sometimes I go on podcasts and then their runtime gets longer, but I didn't want to jinx it. And then here we are.
It's all good.
Yeah, no, it's totally fine. And yeah.
We aim for 90.
We knew it was going to be long. It's been anytime there's like 3 voices on a show, it always gets longer.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but thank you so much for having me on. It was tremendous fun, and yeah, lots of good discussion.
You talk so quickly, dude. Like, I don't even know how your brain processes things so fast.
It's just I am not a patient person, as you've probably picked up on. So yeah, it's just a.
It's like, here's my thoughts and here's how things work, and that's everything I have to say. Goodbye. Like,
Yep.
Oh, great show, everybody.
So you think that would make shows shorter, but it makes them longer because then I say more things, and it's
right.
I haven't figured out the balance there yet. But yeah.
Well, chat.
No, you did great. It was awesome to have you.
Yeah,
thank you.
It's great having you, dude. Chat room, I am going to bring down the stream because I can smell dinner. So we need to free up the VODs so we can start posting. Thank you so much for hanging, everybody. We'll see you next time.